Hi, it would be great if someone could post whether or not they can see and hear me. I've just had a kind of what I could describe as a catastrophic equipment failure. So I'm having to improvise a little bit. If someone could write a comment to say if they can hear this or not, that would be great. Okay, great. Someone has said they can see and hear. Okay, so I've had an equipment failure, so I'm having to just make some adjustments about how I'm going to do this. Yeah, this isn't how I planned it. It was really slick. It's really professional. It's going to be great. Okay. Now, that will have to do. I promise you it's going to be great. So it's going to be a little bit of a bodge job, I'm afraid. So you say you can see and hear clearly. We'll see how it goes, because I had a great setup, but it's going to be, no, you know what? You're not going to see or hear anything because I've got these headphones on. So you'll see, but you won't hear. No, you know what? You're not going to see or hear anything. That's not going to work, is it? Because we're going to hear everything. Okay, that's gone. Hi, thank you, Temi. That was really incredible, really moving. Yeah, really extraordinary. And I don't really know how to kind of follow that except by doing something very, very different. I did want to just point out the amazing solidarity statement that the British Science Fiction Association have included on their Facebook page. And as Temi said, I think, you know, it's not enough just to feel like we ought to be doing something, but we can look towards things that we might be doing, even if it's just educating ourselves and learning more about it, and then, you know, practical things, whether it be protest or whether it be making financial contributions. So have a look at that solidarity statement. It very much, I think, kind of speaks to my own position and has some really useful links and references on it as well. So I'm Dan Byrne-Smith. I'm a senior lecturer in fine art theory at Chelsea College of Arts, which is part of UAL, which is University of the Arts London. And I'm kind of partly here because I have a product to plug, and I feel quite shameless plugging it. I don't know if that's the right way around or backwards. It's called Science Fiction. It's published by the Whitechapel Gallery, and it's part of their Documents of Contemporary Art series. And the reason I feel justified in plugging it is that I won't get any money from plugging it, but every copy sold helps to fund the Whitechapel Gallery. And if ever there was a time when institutions like the Whitechapel really need our support and our funding, it's a time like now. What makes it such an amazing book is not really anything I can claim any credit for. It's the material that's in it. There are 2 new commissions. It's the people who have written for it. It's the people who have allowed their work to be reproduced in the book. And it's a work like this is actually the work of more than one person. It's to do with the editorial team, the production team, the people at the Whitechapel, and the designers, and a lot of people went into making this thing happen. So it's a fantastic kind of collective enterprise. And it would be really interesting for people who maybe don't know that much about contemporary art and how artists have been increasingly over the past couple of decades incorporating ideas around science fiction into their practice. And for me, that's been just very fortuitous, as it was the thing that I was always interested in, and to see other artists start to develop that kind of interest in all the different ways in which that happens. And ultimately, it's taking the most interesting things about science fiction, about how it's a tool for critiquing history in the present in order to think about agency and the building of better futures, as Temi was talking about at the end of her brilliant presentation. So I'm going to try doing something quite different. I'm not going to read from anything I've written. I'm going to read from a book that I reread at the beginning of this lockdown period. And it's a really disturbing and problematic book in many ways. And this week I was actually thinking about whether or not it was at all appropriate for me to be reading from it. And I kind of was struggling with it. And it's J.G. Ballard's The Drowned World. And in particular, I mean, it's clearly, as anyone who's read it knows, it's awful in terms of its representation of the one woman who is in the book, and it's really horrific in terms of its representations of race and the idea of the kind of non-white other, and it's really kind of shocking and unacceptable, and it was really brutal to kind of read it. Yet there's something else really interesting about what this book does, and ultimately I thought it's better to take what's valuable about a really problematic text than dismiss it because of the bad things that it does. That's the position I've taken. I might be wrong, but my second choice, I started thinking about Kojoeshen's work on sonic fictions, and I started thinking about maybe incorporating that into what I'm going to do this evening. And then I started to think about what kind of authors influence Kojoeshen, and Ballard is one of them. And so I thought it's better to kind of address this. I won't be reading from any of these problematic sections. What really struck me about this book, particularly at reading it in sort of late March, as my life and everybody else's life started to change quite dramatically, was the concept of time that is addressed in this book. And it's this idea that Ballard comes up with of neuronic time. And I feel like there's work that needs to be done with this idea of neuronic time. If at the beginning of this lockdown period, people started talking about all the Netflix shows and novels and movies they were going to watch, which, by the way, I don't know when anyone's doing any of that stuff. I mean, if you have a job, it's like teaching. I'm busier than I've ever been in my life. But time did seem to be different. The blurring of one day into the next, the destruction of old routines and the establishment of new ones. And so I started to think about this idea of neuronic time as a sort of maybe a kind of possibility of this present moment, that I don't think very much good stuff is going to come out of this present moment, but maybe rethinking our relationships to time. And it's the kind of time that Jonathan Crary writes about in 24/7. It's time as a sort of totalizing mechanism of globalization and capitalism integrated into the technological devices that we're all using right now. Neuronic time is a different kind of experience of time, and it's nonsense. I mean, it's this idea that as the planet gets hotter, it starts to move through its earlier geological periods, and it induces this kind of time sickness on humans who are experiencing this move back through time, and ultimately they are pulled back through some kind of almost like evolutionary regression in terms of how they think. It's total nonsense. It's kind of not even pseudoscientific, yet it's presented as as a kind of plausible response to this kind of new situation. It's the novum, if you like, of the novel, and I can't get away from this idea as a kind of irrational yet really productive way of challenging kind of normative uses of time as a sort of productive cage in which we're all trapped. Anyway, so I'm going to start reading from Ballard's book, and I'm kind of obsessed with the opening paragraph. And you can just about see here in really slick in the mirror here. All I'm going to be using is my own voice and 2 bits of hardware that are going to transform my voice into another kind of instrument. So it's going to be an improvised performance. I'm not sure how it's going to go. I'll try and keep an eye on time and make sure it doesn't go on too long. So yeah, I will become part of the synthesis process. There will be nothing else involved. There'll be no other kind of sound source. So it will just be what I'm saying. Okay, so without further ado, I shall get going. Soon it would be too hot. Looking out from the hotel balcony shortly after 8 o'clock, Kieran's watched the sun rise behind the dense groves of giant gymnosperms crowding over the roofs of the abandoned apartment stores 400 yards away on the east side of the lagoon. Even through the massive olive-green fronds, the relentless power of the sun was plainly tangible. The blunt, refracted rays drummed against his bare chest and shoulders, drawing out the first sweat, and he put on a pair of heavy sunglasses to protect his eyes. The solar disk was no longer a well-defined sphere, but a wide, expanding ellipse that fanned out across the eastern horizon like a colossal fireball, its reflection turning the dead, leaden surface of the lagoon into a brilliant copper shield. By noon, less than 4 hours away, the water would seem to burn. Soon it would be too hot. Looking out from the hotel balcony shortly after 8 o'clock, Kieran's watched the sun rise behind the dense groves of giant gymnosperms crowding over the roofs of the abandoned apartment stores 400 yards away on the east side of the lagoon. Even through the massive olive-green fronds, the relentless power of the sun was plainly tangible. The blunt, refracted rays drummed against his bare chest and shoulders, drawing out the first sweat, and he put on a pair of heavy sunglasses to protect his eyes. The solar disk was no longer a well-defined sphere, but a wide, expanding ellipse that fanned out across the eastern horizon like a colossal fireball, its reflection turning the dead, leaden surface of the lagoon into a brilliant copper shield. By noon, less than 4 hours away, the water would seem to burn. Soon it will be too hot. Soon it will be too hot. Soon it will be too hot. Looking out from the hotel balcony shortly after 8 Soon it will be too hot. Sunrise behind the dense grove. Soon it will be too hot. Crowding over the roofs of the abandoned apartment stores. Soon it will be too hot. 400 yards away on the east side of the lagoon. Soon it will be too hot. The massive olive-green fronds. Soon it will be too hot. 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 The further down the central nervous system you move, from the hindbrain through the medulla into the spinal cord, you descend back into the neuronic past. For example, the junction between the thoracic and the lumbar vertebrae, between T12 and L1, is the great zone of transit between the gill-breathing fish and the air-breathing amphibians with their respiratory rib cages, the very junction where we stand now on the shores of this lagoon, between the Paleozoic and Triassic eras. Soon it would be too hot. Soon it would be too hot. Soon it would be too hot. The great zone of transit between the gill-breathing fish and the air-breathing amphibians with their respiratory rib cages, the very junction where we stand now on the shores of this lagoon, between the Paleozoic and Triassic eras. The spinal cord, you descend back into the neuronic past. For example, the junction between the thoracic and the lumbar vertebrae, between T12 and L1, is the great zone of transit between the gill-breathing fish and the air-breathing amphibians with their respiratory rib cages, the very junction where we stand now on the shores of this lagoon, between the Paleozoic and Triassic eras. Soon it would be too hot. 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 Soon it would be soon it would be too hot. 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 For example, soon it would be too hot. Stick. So it would be it would be too hot. Soon, it would be too hot. So he left the lagoon and entered the jungle again. Within a few days was completely lost, following the lagoon southward through the increasing rain and heat, attacked by alligators and giant bats, a second Adam searching for the forgotten paradises of the reborn sun. Soon it would be too hot. 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 Okay, I'm going to stop it there. I hope anyone who's still there maybe got a little bit of a kind of experience of neuronic time of their own through that. Yeah, don't really have much to say about it other than that. I'm going to be thinking about neuronic time quite a lot and trying to develop it through a kind of writing project that hopefully I'll be able to develop over the next few months. But I am kind of really interested in maybe how it can correspond to aspects of performance and I guess experiences of listening as well as experiences of creating. And it's very hard for me to get any distance of that kind of experience of listening and creating. And I guess one of the pleasures I take from using machines like this and experiences like this is I'm doing as much listening, or maybe, yeah, I'm doing the listening as I'm doing it. And again, I feel like it's not really me just doing this thing, but it's somehow a kind of collaboration between the machines and you as an audience and Ballard's work and so on. Anyway, thank you very much. I'll say good night.